So, as you can see, we're losing regulatory bodies via the Supreme Court's decision to overturn the Chevron ruling. Um, so, to segue a little bit, a July 2022 protest in Moberly, aptly named "It Won't Stop at Roe" to rise up against the overturning of Roe, took place. The group scares a woman because of harassment. Trigger laws were a euphemism for states' rights to justify or not justify whether or not it was in national security best interest to keep children born after COVID. Now, this may seem irrelevant, but this is so connected to the overturning of our democracy, as obviously. So, despite the geriatric rape of rape culture and allowing children just to become pregnant whenever by lawyers, if you listen to my Myth of Family, then abortion was on the global fundamentalist list to remove, along with divorce, gay rights, and trans rights, which made the left look for only one wolf, putting their energy into a corrupt man who's about to be replaced and too old to remember when it happens. These young activists in blue no matter who spirits, simply strung along by the status quo in a progressive victory shell. So, a lyric honestly comes to mind, quote, "You can still be crucified when your hand is a fist, now back to regular scheduled bullshit," end quote. So, that's a quote by Angel Spit, by the way. They're pretty problematic nowadays, I believe, but they're really solid when it comes to their politics, honestly. Now watch out for some dog whistles here and there. Um, anyways, this time the Supreme Court removed any responsibility to regulate by overturning Chevron deference. Judges would usually look into ambiguous laws and situations with any regulated institution and make their call. This plays into controlling corporate bodies that are rich enough to, within the law itself, already boil the environment, pollute the oceans, and pave with radioactive roads in Florida, which I'll get to. So as you can see here, it the Chevron issue plays into how the FDA is going to play into health regulation. It's going to play into tech, environmental issues. This is honestly way more serious than most people are probably realizing. Now, when I went on my Facebook, which I haven't been on in like months, there was actually some interesting concern about it, so that's good. So, before the Chevron ruling was overturned, um, we still had like mass death and mass poisonings. So, this is obviously a little late, but new bills to limit heavy metals found in baby food. So, we all know that basically at this point everything is polluted. This isn't just like a pesticide to protect the agriculture type of protection. This is actually they're doing it on purpose, you know. Okay. 2019 report from the advocacy group Healthy Babies Bright Futures said that 95% of baby foods from major manufacturers contained lead, and a quarter of the baby foods contained all four heavy metals. So, yeah. So there was also a like a certain type of cinnamon juice, cinnamon product that actually had lead in it, and it was supposed to taste like cinnamon because I guess I don't know if it was a flavoring or that's actually what it came off as. Yeah, so this is not some accident, and as the Chevron ruling becomes overturned, as we have seen, um, it's only going to get worse. Like, babies will die even more than they already have been. So this is what I wanted to get to with the Radioactive Road Bill signed into law by Florida. This is great, guys. Florida's recent history of water quality impairments is no secret, most recently highlighted in the aftermath of Hurricane Lan and Nicole. Rampant pollution, harmful algae blooms, fish kills, seagrass die-off, and mass mortality events of endangered and cultural wildlife have dominated waterways and headlines across the state. Florida also had a history with phosphates, the substance that is used to make fertilizer, and phosphate mining. Phosphogypsum is the radioactive byproduct or waste product that results from the process of making fertilizer. Given that phosphogypsum releases cancer-causing radon gas and toxic cocktail of carcinogens, EPA requires that it is stored in gypstacks precisely because it is so toxic, a storage system that is bound to fail and has, most recently in 2021, with the Piney Point emergency, where hundreds of millions of gallons of toxic water waste were discharged into Tampa Bay, contributing to one of the worst red tide blooms and fish kills in 50 years. That's why Surf Riders, Suncoast chapter has been active and vocal in their opposition to the phosphate industry in Florida, given its impacts on regional water quality and environmental health. Alarms were sounded with the introduction of HB 1191, use of phosphogypsum, at the beginning of 2023 legislative session. The bill would allow for the use of phosphogypsum as a part of a demonstration study by the Florida Department of Transportation for the stability of the substance in road construction in Florida by April 2024. While radioactive roads and runoff sounds like dystopian science fiction, this bill would make it reality in Florida. Despite existing water quality impairments and concerns, the bill moved swiftly through both chambers of the legislature, but not without opposition and several common sense amendments that would have required a concurrent environmental impact study by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. These efforts ultimately failed, and within hours of passage, Surf Riders Network activated to urge the governor to veto this toxic legislation through individual emails. Chapter veto letter and participation in a veto sign-on letter led by partners at Sierra Club and Center for Biological Diversity. Unfortunately, calls for the governor to veto this bill were unheard, and he signed the bill into law on June 29, 2023. Given the harrowing implications for water quality and public health, Surf Rider is disappointed at the passage of the bill and will closely watch the implementations of this bill and the demonstration study to prevent the use of phosphogypsum in Florida roadways. Floridians should not be subjected to exposure to cancer-causing substance in their communities and waterways. Join Surf Riders Florida Network today to follow this critical. Yeah, so this is probably already happening. Again, even as the Chevron thing is overturned, this is easily going to be sort of instilled even to this point in history, in our collapse in democracy. Anyways, moving on. That's really disturbing. So, the Supreme Court also gave Trump immunity, which honestly, is this any surprise? He got to be on the presidential debate with Biden. Like, we already saw the collapse of our democracy happen. Like, there was like no hesitation there. Like, for years, Trump did the big lie, taking after Hitler after saying the system was against him, and saying they're after him, censoring him, it's all fake, etc. Lying about his state of play in the system until he finally got his way. Trump defied the coup allegations, the stealing documents allegations, Stormy Daniel allegations, gag orders, was bailed out immediately when he first went to prison that time, and was going to that gross-looking prison that they showed for 2 seconds. Like that, nothing ever came of that. In reality, everything was on his side. Nothing about his list of crimes hindered his chances at all in our clown show system, giving him direct immunity by the Supreme Court. So, I think Trump is restricted from doing anything corrupt in private, so anything goes if we count in the Chevron Deference Act being overturned, adding more weight to what Trump will do beyond the anti-regulation status quo. Though, as I already went into, money could always bend the law, boil the oceans, pollute everything. There's a snarky but truthful statement that goes as such, quote, the Supreme Court doesn't want regulations unless it's women's bodies, which, I already segued with our democracy being overturned with the start of Roe. So, speculation abound with what will or should happen, people seeing this as a chance for Trump to be legally assassinated somehow. Of course, none of the actual problems socially would be solved at all. So, the Supreme Court ruled on Monday that Donald Trump cannot be prosecuted for actions that were within his constitutional powers as president in a landmark decision recognizing for the first time any form of presidential immunity from prosecution. So, again, yes, this is not just in favor of Trump, this is any president, and with the Chevron ruling gone, like, you're, as a capitalist body, an agency that can be regulated, technically you aren't anymore. The president is a product of the system, and so the Chevron deference, I think, also applies to him as as our system is bought and paid for. All right. Moving aside here. Yes. All right. So this story is a bit old, but it's still really important to what's absolutely happening and connecting to the automation I don't want to say uprising because it's still the elites pushing this. So, the Great Replacement rhetoric reached its peak with conservatives creating immigrant fears once again, like Nikki Haley, by saying 8 million illegals were coming in, specifically Biden letting them in. Of course, as demographers know, America has always been iffy about immigration. Trump and Biden literally continued Title 42 at the time of the pandemic, and after representing a different vibe. Oh, so they totally represented a different vibe for dealing with immigration. At least as a two-party system, usually there's differing views, but they were still keeping up with the strictness. So it is a little different this time. The pandemic severely cut off sectors and harming business, the economy on the edge of collapse, which considered the elderly peak burden after a while, despite a lot of elderly still working in pension reform slavery. So the halting of immigration, anti-abortion, and elder management during COVID was actually a reset for automation to slowly roll out to compensate for lack of workers. Now, this isn't like a scheme against the society at large, of course, but nobody really likes that this is happening. Of course, we've always had a change in the system where people fell through the cracks as things were industrialized, so this isn't really new. There will always be people that fall through the cracks, unfortunately. But yes, the immigration scapegoat is actually, and I jokingly say this, immigrants aren't stealing your job. It's Robot Jose. It's not that funny, but, it's a little silly. Anyways, so with automation slowly rolling out, taking 80 million jobs by 2025, while wedge issue immigration persists. So segueing into that, the recession and automation changes our future of work, but there are jobs coming, reports say. Yes. At least that's what they promise as they make robot workers. They like humanoids for real. Like, you can look this up. This is happening. So, the workforce is automating faster than expected, displacing 85 million jobs in the next 5 years. 2025, which is literally not too far away. I believe AI, fast food, drive-through shit, that's failing, actually. I don't think anyone likes that. The robot revolution will create 97 million new jobs, but communities most at risk from disruption will need support from businesses and governments. And as we will see, governments and businesses are not even close to helping. Now, in the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, his first book by Carl Schwab, he talks about that business and governments have to work together to create a sustainable environment for the new industrial revolution that's happening, that's slowly rolling out, that is actually rolled out before I even knew about the fourth industrial revolution, self-checkout and all that. So, yeah, governments aren't helping. In 2025, analytical thinking, creativity, and flexibility are among the top skills needed, with data and artificial intelligence, content creation, and cloud computing the top emerging professions. So this is actually true. We're seeing live streaming like all over the place. I mean, people are doing everything online. So the most competitive businesses will be those that choose to reskill and upskill current employees. Read the Future of Jobs report, which is a video overview, and watch live stream sessions from the Jobs Reset Summit. So, Geneva, Switzerland, 2001, October 2020. The Future of Jobs 2020 report has found that COVID-19 has caused the labor market to change faster than expected. The research released today by the World Economic Forum indicates that what used to be considered the future of work has already arrived. By 2025, automation and a new division of labor between humans and machines will disrupt 85 million jobs globally in medium and large business across 15 industries and 25 economies. Roles in areas such as data entry, accounting, administrative support are decreasing in demand as automation and digitization in the workplace increases. More than 80% of business executives are accelerating plans to digitize work processing and deploy new technologies, and 50% of employees are expected to accelerate the automation of some roles in their companies. In contrast to previous years, job creation is now slowing while job destruction is accelerating. COVID-19 has accelerated the arrival of the future of work, said Sadia Zahidi, managing director, World Economic Forum. Quote, accelerating automation and the fallout from COVID-19 recession has deepened existing inequalities across labor markets and reversed gains in employment made since the global financial crisis in 2007 to 2008. It's a double disruption scenario that presents another hurdle for workers in this difficult time. The window of opportunity for proactive management of this change is closing fast. Businesses, governments, and workers must plan to urgently work together to implement a new vision for the global workforce. Some 43% of the business surveyed indicate that they are set to reduce their workforce due to technology integration. 41% plan to extend their use of contractors for tasks specialized work, and 34% plan to expand their workforce due to technology integration. By 2025, employees will divide work between humans and machines equally. Roles that leverage human skills will rise in demand. Machines will be primarily focused on information and data processing, administrative tasks, and routine manual jobs for white and blue-collar positions. So the hope is that we work together with the machines, obviously. There's people rising up all over the world. Like, activism isn't working, and the elites know that people are rising up. They want to be paid more, and for the most part, the machines will replace them if they are becoming too outspoken. This will happen. So they don't have to pay the machines that much. They have to pay the workers to grease the machines, but not in the sense of like cleaning a dish to keep the system going. It's actually a little more darker than that at this point. Alright, so this is a thing that pretty much goes back and forth. So a proxy for the resources, the thing that you utilize to buy the resources, money, for instance. So BRICS is a rival that's been reoccurring for a little over 10 years, and IMF is the International Monetary Foundation, I believe. So they are the ones most responsible for money along with the big bank, and they are sort of putting the world into debt. So with that happening, there are other people that can topple the dollar because the dollar is so unstable. And anyways, the International Monetary Fund, commonly called the World Bank, confirmed that the US dollar is in jeopardy against BRICS nations and other local currencies. The IMF took into consideration the de-dollarization agenda initiated by BRICS to uproot the US dollar from the world's reserve currency status. The threat from BRICS and other local currencies against the US dollar is real and should be taken seriously. So this is because the algorithm can hear you and everything is through the stock market sees positivity, the algorithm sees positivity. So people who are severely close, economists that are close to the dollar, they have to be positive, because at this point, if there's enough negativity, this will show, even if things are actually going well in reality. So the gold standard removal into the dollar ultimately represented elite GDP and economic progress with flowing bodies keeping up with printed money. National security pronatalists know work must be continuous to keep the rat race blood pumping. And national confidence to algorithmic faith for stability in identity, especially after wartime. For better or worse, actually, even though this is true after wartime, it seems as though that we are in a constant state of war, as the war on terror and the birth scheme to put us in a state of fear, which doesn't work, by the way. People can't afford anything anyways. People might opt out to have children in the first place. So for better or worse, we spread our values, and we have always needed an equilibrium of other populations to benefit our own. The IMF has put the global order into debt, including the poor. This acts like a strain, which I will get to now, actually. I believe this acts like a strain, like property value dropping. Because the dollar has a history of debt and crisis, dollars burned and bodies dropped, material priorities shift, and the balance goes off track. Alright. So, thus, another proxy for the resources enters the struggle, which I went over, BRICS. And so, there's always going to be worry about their dominance, but as long as there's this overwhelming, probably overhyped confidence of the dollar and our supremacy, it'll always sort of be the dominant thing above BRICS. So the IMF, World Bank, warn of huge buildup of debt in the poorest nations, and I already went off in a way that this is because they're already poor, and we want to make them our bitch. So we give them everything, and we expect so much back, even though they can't afford it. But we want to look like we're actually humanitarian. The heads of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank warned Wednesday that rising interest rates are squeezing the world's poorest countries as they struggle with the coronavirus and soaring food prices. There is, quote, a huge buildup of debt, especially in the poorest countries, World Bank President David Malpass said in the press conference. As interest rates rise, the debt pressures are mounting on developing countries. We need to move urgently towards solutions. Malpass said that the debt crisis is a topic of expensive discussion at this week's spring event of the World Bank and IMF, already dominated by other daunting issues, including the war in Ukraine, the coronavirus pandemic, and the slowing global economy, which is because of aging and shrinking nations which the coronavirus helped with. So, I don't know, it kind of leaves that out. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva told Reporter Wednesday that 60% of low-income countries were in or near debt distress, an alarming threshold reached when debt payments equal half of the size of their national economies. Countries that strain to pay their creditors will also struggle to help the poorest citizens at the time when the Ukraine war is disrupting food shipments and pushing food prices higher. Countries around the world piled on debt to shield their economies from ravages of the coronavirus pandemic and the lockdowns meant to contain it. The IMF forecasts that government debt in low-income countries will surpass 50% of gross domestic product, the broadest measure of economic output, this year, up from less than 44% in the pre-pandemic year, 2019. Globally, the massive economic assistance has worked, fueling an unexpectedly quick recovery from 2020's pandemic recession. But the rebound caught business by surprise. They scrambled to meet surging customer demand, which overwhelmed factories, ports, and freight yards. Deliveries slowed and prices rose. The IMF now forecasts that consumer prices will jump 8.7% this year in emerging market and developing countries, and 5.7% in advanced economies, the most since 1984. In response, the world's central bank, led by the United States Federal Reserve, are raising interest rates to combat rising prices. Higher rates will increase the debt burden, most painfully in the world's poorest countries. So, this also impacts how the elderly are seen as well, I believe. And just like with withholding vaccines from the world's poor, I do believe it's also possible that we made this more complicated than it had to be in terms of resource allocation. So, I want to get to this last one, but I think I might make it in a separate video, but it is completely related to this. Alright, I will see you in the next one, guys.